In Wisconsin and Ohio, they have decided there can no longer be two classes of citizens, one that receives rich health and pension benefits and all the rest who are left to pay for them. The promises of the past are too expensive, and the prospects of the future are too important to stay on the old failed course. Across the country, we have come to a moment.
Chris Christie has become the media's favorite mouthpiece for a whole cluster of conservative arguments about the perilous economic situation that states find themselves in right now, and a specific story about the culprits for state budget troubles and the remedies. And chief remedy number one, squeeze the unions until they choke. There are, of course, different situations in all of these different states that we're now seeing anti-union proposals on the table. But the central case here on the right is that states are facing budget crises because of the public sector unions. That's the argument. It's the argument being made by Scott Walker in Wisconsin, by Chris Christie in New Jersey, and by conservatives in the media like David Brooks in the New York Times. Mr. Brooks writing today, quote, states with public sector unions tend to run into fiscal crises. Tend. Look at that argument again. It's summed up in four little letters, T-E-N-D. Those four letters are bearing a very heavy causal load right there. Their little shoulders are straining. The T and the D are sagging down, asked to shoulder so much of this argument. That's the thesis the right is selling right now. So let's test it. There are a few different ways to do that. A political scientist named John Sides had a very bright idea to just graph it out to see if there's a connection. What you're looking at right now is a result of that. Now, there's a lot of information on this graph, but don't be scared. Here is the bottom line. A state like Mississippi, for example, it's a very low union membership rate. About 5% of the state's workforce is in a union. Mississippi's current budget shortfall is about 16% of their budget. A state like New York, on the other hand, has a very high union membership rate, about 25% of its workforce. Their budget shortfall is pretty much the same as Mississippi's. One state has lots of union members, the other state has very few, and it's the same deficit. Now, that graph was overall union membership. It wasn't specific to public sector union membership, so let's check that part of it. If Republicans are to be relieved right now, then a state that doesn't allow collective bargaining for their public employees should be in pretty good shape, right? A state like, say, North Carolina. North Carolina does not allow government workers to bargain. The result of that, the seventh worst fiscal crisis in the entire country. Idaho, on the other hand, which does allow some bargaining by state workers, they're in the best shape of any state in the country. This idea that somehow public sector labor unions are the main cause of these budget crises is just not supported by the evidence.